Viva Las Vegas.
Elvis sang about it. Mobsters flock to it. And every year, millions of tourists converge on it, hoping to make their dreams come true. But when Las Vegas was first founded on May 15th, 1905, as the perfect stop to refuel and rest between Salt Lake City and Southern California, the "what happens here stays here" maxim was still light years away. The Depression brought hard times to rural Nevada, but decisions in the early 30s to legalize gambling, build the Hoover Dam, and allow for quickie divorces would prove prophetic for Las Vegas's economy.
In 1940, the Chamber of Commerce put a big feature together, a photo feature with Clark Gable's wife at the time, Rhea Gable, and they were trying to actually compete with Reno, the northern counterpart, because Reno was really stressing the 6 weeks divorce. And so Las Vegas started going after that. Incidentally, the same year the legalization of gambling, that's when the divorce laws and the marriage laws went into effect. It made it a real kind of a package.
Building the Hoover Dam would bring jobs, but it was the gambling and everything that goes along with it that put Vegas on the map.
So governments have undone what it took hoodlums years to do, in the process creating new jobs, prosperity, and tax revenues. But with all that has come the haunting question: is all this really good for society?
New York gangster Bugsy Siegel saw the developing southwestern city as a perfect opportunity to expand his business.
Organized crime, per se, came here, some of them, and built some of these hotels. That's how it started.
They started out with Bugsy Siegel in 1943 when he began the construction of the Flamingo right in the middle of the Strip.
Las Vegas, as we know it today, might never have existed without Bugsy Siegel's vision. Bugsy Siegel thought of it, Bugsy Siegel developed it, Bugsy Siegel's will created it. Bugsy had a great sense of flair and style, and not vulgar style, of a kind of Hollywood elegance, and that's what he wanted to do, bring the glamour of Hollywood to Las Vegas, because he was a failed movie star himself. So his best friends, Cary Grant, Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, George Raft, were the stars, but he was a star off camera, and his real Hollywood was going to be transplanted, recreated, invented in the desert in Las Vegas.
But after Bugsy opened up the Flamingo in 1946, Christmas time, then the mob had their stronghold in Las Vegas, and they expanded with the Desert Inn and the Flamingo, and of course then the Riviera and the Stardust became the flagship station of the Chicago mob. They were all at one time or another mobbed up.
And they weren't there just for the weather.
The main reason that the mob was in here, the sine qua non, as you would call it, was the ability to skim, to steal the money from the drop boxes underneath the tables and from the slot machines and so forth. And before it was counted officially in the counting rooms, they would steal that money and then courier it all the way across the country to the different mobs. Talking about millions of dollars from every casino annually in Las Vegas. And we're talking about the period of the very late 40s, but primarily the 50s, 60s, and early 70s.
In some ways, Vegas was still the wild, wild west.
When the wise guys owned the hotels, when the mob guys owned the hotels, all they cared about was one thing: the drop in the pit. What's the drop in the pit? It was called the drop. In other words, how much money was gambled. Now, were there hookers? Of course there were. I mean, that was a wild town in those days. Anything went.
To keep tourists gambling, there needed to be other attractions. In 1941, the El Rancho Vegas Hotel Casino, the first resort built on the Strip, had non-stop entertainment. At Bugsy Siegel's Flamingo Hotel opening in 1946, he brought some of his most famous Hollywood connections. Soon big names began playing Vegas every night.
When you talked about Las Vegas, you talked about heaven. You talked about the epitome of show business. That's where, in those days, there were no comedy clubs in America, so there were all nightclubs all over America. So you worked all those little nightclubs in hoping one day you would appear in Las Vegas, where all the big stars were.
Wayne Newton, Anne Margaret, And, of course, the Rat Pack were some of Vegas's biggest attractions.
In the early stages of Las Vegas and in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, the mob had great influence on an entertainer, where he performed and what his salary was and so forth. He really had their thumb on that situation. We're talking about some of the big stars, Sinatra, for instance, and Dean Martin and Don Rickles. The mobsters try to use those guys as much as they possibly can.
Dean Martin told me many years ago, when the wise guys come up to you, be respectful, but keep them at arm's length. You know, if they ask you if you want anything, you don't need anything. But they were there, of course they were there.
In 1975, Tom Dreesen, an up-and-coming comedian from Harvey, Illinois, was invited by Sammy Davis Jr. to open for him in Vegas.
The first time I ever went to Las Vegas was the first time I ever appeared there. I had never been in Las Vegas. And now I was going down this strip in a limousine with Sammy Davis Jr., and they were putting my name on the marquee at Caesar's Palace with Sammy Davis Jr. It's just hard to describe what that's like your first time there. It's awesome and it's intimidating. And all you can think of is, God, I hope I can pull this off.
Dreesen worked with some of the biggest names in the business, but then Frank Sinatra asked him to do a few dates with him.
To go to Las Vegas with Frank Sinatra is he was Las Vegas. No artist, no 10 artists brought in as many high rollers as Frank Sinatra. The drop in the pit when Frank Sinatra was there was enormous. Not only did the hotels that he was in make a fortune because they'd be sold out when he was there, but the hotels surrounding that particular hotel. After the shows every night, in those days, we'd go up and down the strip to all the lounges. That's what's different between Las Vegas today and Las Vegas of yesteryear. And I remember the comedians would all get together sometimes at the Riviera coffee shop, and we'd hang out there till 2, 3, 4 in the morning telling stories. And I'd be sitting around with Joan Rivers and Rodney Dangerfield and David Brenner and Steve Martin, whoever was in town.
But by the late 60s, big corporations began moving in. Giant resorts would follow. The mob was on its way out, and the Gaming Control Board was gaining strength.
When the boys went out and the corporations came in, the whole town changed.
Well, Vegas was more of a family affair, which I think all the big entertainers will tell you, that it was a fun relationship amongst the performers. Now the hotels are big corporations, and there's no time for that camaraderie.
It is a lot different now with the corporations involved. It was warmer. I don't know how to say it.
Her current reputation as a world-class entertainment center for business and even families notwithstanding, there's no denying why people head to Las Vegas.
People come here to have fun and play. They play hard and gamble hard, and we know that. It's not like any other city in the world. And we welcome them here, and that is what's made Las Vegas.